So I think it's an observable fact that just because a person makes a commitment to do a certain thing, that doesn't necessarily mean that they'll be successful at doing that thing. For example, not every person who walks through the door of an AA meeting successfully overcomes their addiction to alcohol. Of all the thousands of young people who will start university in the fall, not all of them will successfully complete their degrees. Not every young couple who stands at the altar and says, I promise to be faithful and to love you until death us do part, manages to have a faithful, loving relationship until death do they part. And the point that St. Mark makes in this morning's story is that a present commitment, however genuine, to the Christian faith is no guarantee of a future faith. And the reason he makes this point is because, writing as he is in the mid-60s of the first century, it is painfully obvious to him that Christianity does not stick in 100% of cases. It doesn't work in the life of every person who tries it. So, for example, have a look at this. These words were written in the year 112 AD by a man called Pliny. Pliny was the Roman governor of a place called Bithynia. This is modern-day Turkey, the heartland of the ancient church. Pliny, in this letter, writes to the emperor in Rome, giving him details of his investigation into the troubling sect of Christianity. Look at what he says. He says, in my investigation, I spoke to some who were accused of being Christians. They denied it, explaining that they had been, but had ceased to be such. Some of them 3 years ago, some many years ago, and a few even 20 years ago. So you understand what Pliny is saying in this letter. He's saying some of the people I spoke to about Christianity were quite blasé about the whole thing. They shrugged their shoulders and says, yeah, sure, I used to be Christian, I used to believe stuff, I used to have faith about things, but not anymore. What my self-identity was 3 years ago, 20 years ago was that, but now it is something completely different. Here's my college photo. I won't show you where I am in it.
The guy with hair.
The guy with hair, yeah, thank you. So obviously every person who would go to a Bible college would do so with a certain worldview, with a certain set of assumptions about how their life was going to turn out. If one were to generalize, they would say every person in this photo wanted to learn more about Jesus, they wanted to learn more about their faith, and they wanted to then use that knowledge in some type of Christian service. And I could tell you sad story after sad story about how people in this photo no longer speak of themselves in Christian terms. And it is stories like that, stories that you know, stories that I know, that Mark has on his mind as he pens this morning's episode. So we begin in verse 53 of Mark 14, where we read that following Jesus' arrest that we looked at last Sunday, he's taken to court. And notice, please, that Mark is careful to tell us that Peter followed at a distance. Now, the phrase "at a distance" is telling, because only an hour or so earlier, remember, Peter quite vociferously affirmed his closeness to Jesus. Remember, only a few hours earlier, Peter had said in no uncertain terms, Jesus, I'm going to be there for you. Other people, they might let you down. Other people, they might turn their back on you, but I will always be there for you. I'll never turn my back on you. Whenever you need me, I'll be there. And when Peter said that, I think he meant it. I think he was 100% genuine. Because he said it on the basis of having successfully been Christian for the previous 3 years. And just as when we don't look into our future and see failure, we don't look into our future and see ourselves breaking our promises or hurting the ones we love, so too Peter sees nothing in his future but a successful continuation of the thing he's successfully been doing for the previous 3 years. And a sober reading of the gospel must make us see ourselves in this failure. Whenever we talk about unreliable people who let us down, which we like to do, we all have unreliable people in our lives who've let us down, and it's fun to vent about them. But those conversations must include an acknowledgement that we can be unreliable as well, and that we have within our own humanity the capacity to damage ourselves and the ones we love the most. And for some of us, when we talk about being let down and hurt, it is honestly a painful reminder that there are episodes in our story where we were the ones who did the letting down and did the hurting. And just as when we look into our future, we don't see things like addictions, like affairs, like losing our faith or whatever. We don't see ourselves like in the letter of Pliny saying, I used to be Christian. I used to have faith. So too Peter, quite naturally and quite understandably, sees nothing in his future but a carrying on of the successful Jesus following that he's known for the last 3 years. And now in this sentence, Mark, in describing the lack of proximity with which Peter is following Jesus, he is hinting that there is a distancing going on in his life that is more than geographic. And remember, Mark wasn't there. He wasn't an eyewitness to the gospel. Mark, we understand, got his information from Peter himself. So you can imagine how honest this conversation was in Rome in 63 AD. Mark, there's one episode I haven't told you about yet. The hardest one for me to tell. The one when I let him down. When I wasn't there for him. When I turned my back on him. Need to tell you that story too. It doesn't enter into our imagination that we won't always be what we are today. For example, I make plans for the church, for the teaching particularly. And when I make plans on what I'm going to teach you Sunday by Sunday, I sit down and I look at my day planner and the calendar, and I plan what I'm going to teach on what Sunday. That's what I do. And so I can tell you with some certainty that in August, we're going to be starting a new teaching series called Listening to Win. I'm very aware that we all have circumstances in our lives where we can do with a win. In our relationships, in our professional lives, so many areas where we need to win. And so I want to talk about how the Christian virtues of empathy and of other-centeredness can help us achieve some of those wins. But here's what it doesn't say in my day planner. There's no mention of, in October, I'm going to get addicted to weed once it's legal. I didn't write that down. There's no mention of, in December, I'm going to get arrested for drink driving and lose my license. I didn't mention that. There's no mention of, in January, my career's going to be in ruins. I didn't write that down either. We don't plan for that kind of stuff, do we? But nevertheless, that kind of stuff does happen. And it happens to people just like us. So we need this story as a reminder that what we successfully are doing today, we will not necessarily be successfully and faithfully doing tomorrow. So we find Jesus in in a group that Mark calls the chief priests and the teachers of the law and those guys. This is the first century Sanhedrin. And the Sanhedrin, as you probably know, were the religious leaders of the Jewish people in Jesus' day. They worked closely with the Romans. They were a savvy buffer between the Romanness of the Roman governor and the Jewishness of the Jewish people. And one of the ways they behaved in the first century was as the high court. This week I spent a little bit of time looking into first century Jewish legal procedure. Here's the three things I learned. First of all, innocence was always assumed. So just like in our culture, if you went to court in the first century in Israel, you were innocent until you were proven guilty. Secondly, a trial in the first century had to last more than a day. The reason for this was so that the judge wouldn't be rash, so that on a holiday weekend the judge wouldn't look at his clock and say, I got cottage plans, guilty, take him outside and hang him, right? Thirdly, a charge had to be brought and agreed upon by more than one credible witness, and their evidence had to concur. So if you're in trouble in the ancient world and you have to go to court, the court that Jesus is now in is probably a pretty good one to go to, because the judges have an assumption of your innocence. They're not going to throw down a rash verdict, and the charges have to be confirmed by more than one witness, and the witnesses have to be credible people. So you may assume if you're Jesus and you're taken to court that unless the case against you is bulletproof, you're going to walk. First century Jews were proud of this, rightly so. That being the case, it makes Jesus' trial very unusual. Almost all of its details record a gross violation of first century law. Where innocence was always assumed, here it is not. Where normally a trial had to last more than one day, here it barely lasts 1 hour. Where normally charges had to be corroborated by independent witnesses, here it is not. In this case, it seems the court is not convening with justice on its mind. It is rather actively looking for a way to find Jesus guilty. Hence, we read in verse 55 that the whole Sanhedrin were looking for evidence against Jesus so that they could put him to death. The word looking that Mark uses in this sentence is a word he only ever uses negatively. It means, if I can paraphrase, I am examining your life completely without the benefit of the doubt. In fact, I am examining your life so that I can find information that will confirm my opinion of you. You know what I mean? You know, there's some people in your life you just can't win because they've already decided what you are and who you are and what you're like. And so they always manage to find evidence to fit their view of you. This is where Jesus is at the moment. And yet, tellingly, Mark says that after this incredibly prejudiced examination, they still couldn't find any evidence against Jesus. But that's not the point. The objective of this trial, Mark tells us, is not justice, but death. So in verse 56, he tells us that the judges bring witnesses against Jesus. You know you're in trouble, by the way, when the judge starts bringing in witnesses against you. And then we're told that in total violation of first century legal procedure, these witnesses couldn't agree on what they saw. Therefore, their testimony becomes inadmissible. Then in verse 57, in a moment of farce, some of them stand up and begin, look at what Mark says, to give false testimony against Jesus. So now we're not even trying to be factual. Now we're just into lies. And if you've ever been the victim of a lie, or of a rumor, or of a made-up story, then you know how powerless these things make you. You can win with logic. You can win with facts. But with lies and rumors, you're done. You don't have a chance. Winston Churchill nailed it when he said that a lie travels halfway around the world before the truth has a chance to get its pants on. It's true, isn't it? You literally cannot win against lies and rumours, especially when the recipients of those want to believe them. And we always want to believe them. Lies are far more interesting than the truth. Tabloids are far more entertaining than broadsheets, no? So, verse 67. Having believed the lies, they all condemned him as being worthy of death. Then, some people began to spit at him. They blindfolded him. They struck him with their fists and said, "Prophesy, which one of us hit you?" So here you have Jesus. He's been arrested. Humiliating experience. He's in court. He lost. Humiliating experience. People are telling lies about him. Humiliating experience. And now some people are spitting at him and playing some macabre game involving a blindfold and a series of punches. Now, when you get arrested, it's stressful. When you go to court, it's stressful. When people tell lies about you, it's stressful. When people spit at you or throw a drink at you, it's stressful. When people hit you, it's stressful. When all your power is taken away, it's stressful. It's the kind of stressful that makes you think to yourself, if only I had some friends. If only I had some friends who a few hours ago had sworn to me that they'd never leave me alone. That they'd always be there for me. If only I had friends like that. Oh, wait a minute, I do. I do. Which brings us back to Peter. Peter was sitting outside. Again, notice the geographical lack of proximity that Mark is deliberately wanting to draw our attention to. He is sitting outside. A servant girl came to him. When she saw Peter warming himself by the fire, she said to him, "You also were with Jesus of Galilee." But Peter denied it. And he said, "I don't know what you're talking about." I don't know what Peter planned his day was going to look like when he got out of bed that morning, but I bet he didn't plan that. I bet he wasn't thinking an hour earlier that his life would come to a place where he would deny even knowing his best friend. So, he went out, further away now, another geographical marker, to the gateway where another girl saw him and said to the people there, "This fellow was with Jesus of Nazareth." And he denied it again. And the word deny that Mark uses here is written in the imperfect tense, which means that Peter didn't just deny it. It means he went on and on and on and on and on about denying it. How bizarre is this? I have a close relationship on a Monday with this person. To this person I have made commitments. I have given affirmations. I have sworn love and loyalty and fealty. On Tuesday, I don't want to know them. I don't want to know them. I deny any of it ever even happened. After a little while, those standing near said to Peter, "Surely you are one of them, for you are a Galilean." So, Near Eastern languages they come from the throat, still do. They're a bit like Klingon. There's lots of ughs and ichs. And they are. And Galileans, for some reason, struggled to pronounce those deep, throaty sounds. So whenever Galileans, Galilee's the northern part of first century Israel, So whenever they spoke Hebrew, which was their language, or whenever they spoke Aramaic, which was their language, they just sounded a bit funny. I guess like a Newfie talks when they talk Canadian, right? You can tell. What? You think that's bad? I haven't become a Canadian citizen yet. It's on my list of things to do. If it didn't cost $500, I'd apply sooner. But anyway, when I do eventually jump through that hoop, they're going to make me sit an English test. You don't think that's terrible? I think that's terrible. English is the only language I speak. So anyway, you're obviously not appreciating that on Canada Day. So, what was I saying? Yes, so whenever someone from Galilee spoke their language, it was obvious they were from Galilee. And Christianity, remember, in the early few years of its existence, is primarily a Galilean thing. Jesus is Galilean, the disciples are Galilean, the followers, they're all Galileans. And so it's obvious down in the big city, Jerusalem, that Peter is one of these people. So they hear him denying that he knows Jesus, and they're like, dude, you're from Galilee. That's where you people come from. How can you deny knowing Jesus? He's the biggest thing ever to come out of Galilee. You must be one of them. Then look how Peter reacts. He began to call curses on himself. That's polite first century Greek. But he began to use lots of sweary words. And then he said to them, I don't know the man. I don't know the man. The man. He can't even bring himself to use his name now. It's not Jesus anymore, he's just the man. Two things to say about Jesus while this is going on, and they both matter. First of all, Jesus never ever let the behavior of others influence the way that he himself behaved. Think about what's happening in this episode. On one side of the room, you have Jesus in the early stages of dying for Peter's sin. Among others, but Peter's as well. The arrest, the humiliation, the lies, that's the early stages of him dying on the cross. And he's doing that for Peter. And on the other side of the room, you have Peter saying, Jesus, my friend, are you kidding me? I don't even know the man. Now, I don't know about you. But if I was Jesus in this moment, I'd be like, sod this, I'm not dying for him. He said he'd be there for me. Now he doesn't even admit that he knows me. I'm not doing nothing for him. He's on his own. But not Jesus. Jesus never once let the behavior of others determine his own. And I mention that because this is a virtue that few of us have, but all of us need. The unreliability of another person doesn't give us a pass for unreliability of our own. The people in your life need you to be a bigger person than that. You need to be reliable and dependable, even though they're not. Even though they can't, especially when they can't. Secondly, sooner or later in this life, if you're honest, you have to come to terms with the awful truth that sometimes you're the one whose word could not be trusted. That you were the one whose own actions brought pain and suffering, not only into your life, but into the lives of those whom you love. Final sentence of the dark story. Immediately after he denied him, the rooster crowed, and then Peter remembered the word Jesus spoke to him. Before the rooster crows twice, you will disown me 3 times. And he broke down and he wept. In his breakdown, he no doubt realizes that he's done what he's done. As he looks at himself in the mirror, as it were, he realizes he has become a man he thought never to become. And it sobers him and horrifies him. A sober reminder that bold affirmations of reliability are no guarantee against unreliability. Only the young and the arrogant assume otherwise. So what do we make of this? We, who by our stage of life surely have much to regret. So many mistakes to consider. Look at this. This is a church in Jerusalem. It's called the Church of St. Peter Gallicactu, the Church of St. Peter of the Cockcrow. This church was built in the 6th century, not long after Jerusalem became about 2 centuries after Jerusalem became an important pilgrimage site for the early church. And so the early Christian leaders thought, we need to build some churches in this town. We need to build a church on the site where Jesus was crucified. That's important. We need to build a church where Jesus rose from the dead. That'll be good. The pilgrims will love that. And right at the top of their list was building a church at the site of St. Peter's unreliability, of St. Peter's moral failure, of St. Peter, the leader of the church, the first pope in an era where popes mattered. A church on the site of his failure. Why would you do a thing like that? What was going through their mind? The church of the motel where you cheated on your partner. It's got a ring to it. The chapel of the boardroom where you did a dishonest deal and screwed over your workers. Sign me up. The church of the bar where you ruined your life and spent the money that belonged to your kids. That's what they did. The early church were open and they were honest about what we're all like and what we're all capable of. Because the early church were convinced about the kindness and the mercy and the grace of the God in whom they believed. In the Bible, we hear the truth that our Heavenly Father says, how you act in this life will not determine how I act. We hear the reliability and the commitment of God. I have decided to be faithful to you. I have decided that I will love you. I have decided that I will forgive you and that I will show you mercy, and your behavior will not affect what I have decided. I have decided that I will be faithful to my promises towards you, and nothing, no matter how low it goes for you in this life, will detract from that. What's the troubling scandal of the gospel? Where sin increases, grace increases all the more. This was ingrained in the thought life of the early church. You, my Christian friend, unreliable as you are, you're solid with God. You're solid. You don't need to worry. You don't need to be afraid. You don't need to be scared about what lies ahead. You don't need to worry about the past. It's gone. It's forgiven. You're good. That's what Christianity, that's what the cross was all about. That's why he died. You're good. You're fine. You're solid. Relax. All right? Be thankful for grace. And accept that you're forgiven. And get on with it. Let's pray. Our Father in heaven, we thank you for your mercy, for your kindness, for your forgiveness, and most of all for your faithfulness. we believe. Though the believing is sometimes hard, but we believe nonetheless that there is a God. We believe that you are good, that you are kind. We further believe that you know exactly what we're going through. We dare to believe that you are able to help. So be with us then, we ask. Fill our circumstances, whatever they may be, with your peace. Give us hope. We ask this through Christ our Lord.